Welcome to Savor the Flavors. My name is Brittany Allyn, and today I'm in historic St. Augustine, Florida. Now, some might come here in search of the fountain of youth, but you know me, I'm always in search of a great place to have lunch. Today's restaurant is located on Avila Street. It's the oldest street in the oldest city in the United States. Join me as I savor the flavors of Gaufre and goods. Gaufre is a French word for waffles, and I've heard that they have some amazing waffles here, and I am going to try one, but for dessert. Actually, there's other things on the menu that really piqued my curiosity. It's full of Polish and Greek dishes. The owners, Darius and Grace Jerlatka, are from Poland, but spent many years living in Greece as well, and so they're sharing their heritage and family heirloom recipes right here at their restaurant. Now, I love Greek dishes and flavors, but it's a little more unusual to find Polish dishes on a restaurant menu, so that's the route I'm taking for lunch today. Now, they have something on the menu called Taste of Poland, which sounds perfect because it'll give me a chance to try several things. Moving on with my Taste of Poland, we have a couple traditional dishes on the plate here. We have pierogi. These are wonderful little dumplings made of flour and water, and they have different fillings in them. They boil them and then later pan fry them or pan saute them with some onions. And let's just see what's inside here. Ooh, this one has spinach in the filling, very traditional. Ooh, if I can get it so you can see it. Look at that. Wow. The spinach has great flavor. Because they've been fried, they're like buttery, and there's onions. This is beautiful, beautiful comfort food. This one has a meat filling. I'm going to put a little bit of sour cream on there. I got some paprika in the sour cream. Comfort food right here. So good. Now, also on the plate, we have bigos. Bigos is a very traditional Polish dish. It's also known as hunter's stew. Different types of meats. It can be beef and pork and different sausages. There's sauerkraut in here and some prunes for a little sweetness, some raisins. It is so complex. It's almost got a little like barbecue thing going on, but more complex than that. Very rich, obviously braised, very slow cooked, served on bread. This makes me long for winter days. This would be the perfect winter meal here. Oh, what a great way to experience Polish dishes. Yum. I couldn't come here and not try the restaurant's namesake, Gaufre. And here, would you look at this? This is dessert. It is huge. Now, Grace and their son Julius explained to me that in Poland, it would normally be a street food, so you would just eat this with your hands. And I think they put too much whipped cream on it for me to eat it with my hands, but it looks fabulous. I'm going to just cut off this corner here. They're very fluffy waffles, and in Poland, this would be more of a dessert item rather than a breakfast item. Let's see. Oh my gosh. Gotta get some waffle. Gotta get some whipped cream. There's Nutella on here, which is a hazelnut chocolate spread, and strawberries. Hard enough to eat with a fork, but it is gooey, absolutely delicious. The waffle, it looks like a lot here, and there is, but it's like so light and fluffy. So it's not dense at all. It's not a heavy dessert. Oh my gosh. Gaufre and goods is good. Have you ever tasted a dish and been sort of instantly transported back to another place and time where it triggered a food memory? Well, that's what happened for me at Gaufre Goods. When I tasted the bigos, that hunter's stew, it instantly reminded me of a dish I hadn't thought about in years. Growing up in central Minnesota, Bouja was a fall tradition, and rather than a hunter's stew, I've always thought of it as more of a harvest stew. And so today I'll share with you my slow cooker recipe for Bouja. And then for dessert, I had to make a waffle. And because we're making a harvest stew, I thought it would be fun to incorporate some fall flavors. I'll share my maple nut caramel apple waffles. Today we'll begin by preparing the yeast for our waffle batter. Here I have 1½ teaspoons of active dry yeast. The recipe calls for 6 tablespoons of sugar, but I'm going to take 1 teaspoon of that and add it to the yeast. I think it helps it to bloom more effectively. And here I've got 1/4 cup of warm milk. And we're just going to combine all of this. We'll stir it. We want the sugar and the yeast to dissolve into the milk. And once it's dissolved, we're going to let it sit for about 15 to 20 minutes or until it blooms. Okay, now we're just going to let that do its thing, and we're going to move on to Bouja. Bouja is the name of the dish or the stew, but it also can be the name of the event. And in central Minnesota in the fall, a Bouja is indeed an event. It's sort of like a community thing. Everybody comes and they bring what's left out of their gardens and they throw it in a big pot and cook it up. And traditionally the recipes make gallons and gallons and gallons of Bouja. I wanted to savor the flavors, but I wanted to pare the recipe down just a little bit and also make it more convenient by making it a slow cooker recipe. I started earlier. I took a 2-pound Boston butt, trimmed it of any extra fat or sinew, and then cut it into pieces. And also I've learned that Bouja usually has more than one type of meat in it. And so in addition to the Boston butt, I added 1½ pounds of bone-in short ribs and also 1 pound of boneless, skinless chicken thighs. I took a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of pepper, mixed it together, and then just sprinkled it across the meat to season it. I put a little olive oil in my skillet and started to brown the meat. I did the short ribs first, being careful to brown each side. Once the short ribs were cooked, I put them in the slow cooker and then went on to brown the rest of the meat in the fat that rendered from the short ribs. Once all of the pork and the chicken was browned and in the slow cooker, I drained off any excess fat from my skillet and I added 1 large onion that I had diced. I sauteed it for about 5 minutes, just until it was soft and translucent. Then I added 1/4 cup of chicken broth, just to sort of deglaze the pan. And then I took that and poured it over the top of the meat. Then in a large measuring cup, I combined 1 3/4 cup chicken broth, 1 cup of strong brewed coffee, 1½ tablespoons of molasses, stay with me now, and also 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar and 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. And I just whisked all that together and poured it over the top of the meat. And I also added 2 bay leaves and I closed the slow cooker, set it on low to cook for 8 hours. And right now where we're at, the meat has cooked for 5 hours. And so what we're gonna do is just take the meat out of the slow cooker. Take this off, look at that, it's steaming hot, it's been cooking for 5 hours. And we're just gonna remove the meat and also those bay leaves. Once all the meat is removed, it is time to add our vegetables. And I'm going to start with 1 cup of diced carrot, While that's cooking, we're going to shred the meat. And the best way to do that is to just take 2 forks like this and then just pull the meat apart. And because it's cooked for so long, it's so tender, it happens very easily. And you'll want to discard any of the bones or sinew that won't shred easily. My favorite Bouja memory goes back to when I was a little girl. We had some family friends. Their names were George and Polly Schulte, and every year they would host a Bouja. And we lived in a rural area, as did they, and they would invite all their farming friends, all their neighbors, and everybody would come and bring whatever they had left out of their garden. And they cooked it in this huge cast iron kettle that was suspended over an open fire. So it was fall in Minnesota and it was cool, and everybody was sort of warming themselves by the fire, anticipating how wonderful that Bouja was going to be. Recently, I asked my mom and dad if that pot was really as big as I thought it was, and they sort of confirmed what I was thinking. They thought that the pot actually held about 35 to 40 gallons of Bouja. Can you imagine? You can feed a lot of people with that much Bouja. Once all of the meat is shredded, we're going to add it back to our slow cooker. And then we're just going to cook this with the vegetables for another 2.5 hours. While the Bouja is cooking, and by the way, it is smelling fantastic in here, we are going to work on the waffles. We're actually going to start with some of the toppings. I like to top my waffles with some candied walnuts. And to do that, I've got a tablespoon of butter melted in my skillet, and I'm going to add 1.5 cups of walnuts, just walnut pieces. And we're just going to sort of stir those and toast them over medium heat for just a few minutes. And incidentally, I was using unsalted butter. I don't know about you, but I always like whipped cream on my waffles. And for this, I thought it would be fun to make a maple cream. We're going to add a few more ingredients here. I've got 1 tablespoon of maple syrup we're going to add. And also here I have a 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. And we're just going to stir these and toast them a little more, and they'll get nice and candied. Okay, now we're just going to take our walnuts and we'll turn them out onto this wax paper to cool. Spread them around so they don't all stick together. They're so good, I'm telling you. I always actually make a little extra of these because they're so good to snack on. Put them on yogurt for breakfast. Oh, so good. And now onto the waffles themselves. As you can see, our yeast has bloomed beautifully, all nice and puffed up. That's exactly what we want. Here I have 3 cups of all-purpose flour. To that I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt, and we're just going to get that sort of stirred in. And here I have what's left of the 6 tablespoons of sugar, and we're going to add to that a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. We'll just kind of use our whisk to combine that. Now this recipe calls for 2 eggs, and you need to separate them. I have the yolks in my bowl here, and to that we're going to just whisk in about a 1/4 cup of this warm milk. And then here I have a 1/2 stick of oops, dropped my whisk in there. Here I have a 1/2 stick of unsalted butter that I've melted. And then to that, we're going to add the yeast. I actually like the smell of yeast. I think it's got a really interesting scent. Reminds me of bread baking, which is always a good thing. And then to that, I've got a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract and a teaspoon of maple flavoring. I always think it's good to flavor the waffles themselves, and if you can, tailor them to go with the topping flavors. Okay, and we'll add our cinnamon and sugar. Kind of get that sugar dissolved. And then we're just going to add the flour and milk and sort of alternate them, making sure that we end with the flour. Once all of the flour and the milk are incorporated, we're going to add our egg whites. I beat them earlier so that they would be nice and stiff. And we're just going to sort of gently fold them into the batter until they're completely combined, completely blended in. Once the egg whites are all incorporated, we're going to just cover the bowl tightly with plastic wrap and set it in a warm place that's draft-free and allow the batter to rise for about an hour. Our meal and dessert are coming along nicely. I have one ingredient left to add to my bouillon. I'm just gonna open this up. And here I have some quick cooking barley. I love barley in this. It's just a half cup. We're gonna add that and give it a nice stir so it gets all worked into the bouillon. That's looking good. We're going to put the cover back on and let that cook for another 30 minutes. Now, while that's going on, we are going to make our waffles. Get this shut here. There we go. Alrighty. And as you can see, our waffle batter, look at that, it rose nicely. That's exactly what we wanted. We're going to open our waffle iron, smoking hot, and I'm just going to take and brush a little vegetable oil on the grates, just so that it won't stick. Okay, and then we're just going to ladle our waffle batter onto the grates. Look at that. Now, I would suggest that you use the amount of waffle batter that your manufacturer recommends for your appliance. Mine will take about 1 1/4 cups for this. Put it on there, and then I'm just going to take this spatula and just spread it out so it evenly covers like this. We just want a nice even coat. And then we're just going to close this and we're going to let it cook for about 3 to 3.5 minutes. Now, I sure enjoyed myself at Gaufre Goods, and I also enjoyed St. Augustine. There's so much to do. You can see the Castillo de San Marcos. It's the oldest masonry fort in the continental United States. It dates back to 1672. It is so beautiful. And then there's the lighthouse. It's one of the 10 tallest in the United States at 165 feet above sea level, 219 steps to the top. I climbed every one of them, and it was worth it. The view was just breathtaking. And of course, St. Augustine, being as old as it is, it sort of has a European feel to it. And I loved all the little shops, artisans selling their wares. It was really a lot of fun to shop. And of course, don't forget the Fountain of Youth Park. You can learn about the legend of the Fountain of Youth there. Now, let's check our waffles. Oh yeah, they are looking beautiful, nice and golden brown. I'm gonna get my spatula underneath them and just put them on this baking sheet. I've got my oven preheated to 200 degrees. We'll keep them warm until we're ready to serve them. We're gonna come right back, and when we do, we're gonna taste our bouillon. I'm gonna make a wine pairing suggestion, and we're gonna get into these waffles. Don't go away. Welcome back. I was just ladling up some of our bouillon here. It is looking just gorgeous, smelling so fantastic. This is such a hearty meal. It's like the satiating thing that you need after a hard day's work, or maybe just a hard day watching football in the fall. That is a giant serving, perfect for any man, right? And I always like to serve this with a little bit of hearty bread. Now, I like to top this with a little bit of fresh parsley because you have to make it pretty too, right? Even though it's sort of a rustic dish. And the wine I chose to go with today's meal is a South African wine. It's called Protea, which is also the national flower. And it is a blend of 65% Cabernet, 30% Merlot, and 5% Shiraz. The nose is very fruity, blackberry, maybe cocoa, or is it coffee? I don't know. I want it to be coffee because we put coffee in our stew or our bouillon. The palate is much the same, and it also has a really nice spice to it. So I think it will go great with this. Let's taste. This over here. Oh, that broth has such a wonderful depth of flavor. I love the barley in there. The meat, of course, is very tender, and the vegetables are cooked perfectly. I close my eyes, and it's fall in Minnesota. There. So, so delicious. One more spoonful. And let's see about that wine. So good. The wine holds up to the dish, but doesn't overpower. It just really adds to it. A lovely spice. Perfect, perfect for this bouillon. Now I'm gonna make some room here because we need to get on with dessert, right? No point in waiting any longer. Let's build one of our waffles. Just gonna take one of the waffles here, set it on our plate. We'll put it right there. And I did mention that these were maple nut caramel apple waffles. Here I have some just regular canned pie filling, apple pie filling that I heated up. And I put just about a 1/4 cup of orange juice in with it too. Then here I have some caramel, and this is really just ice cream topping, the caramel ice cream topping. And I melted it or heated it just a little. We'll drizzle that across the top. Beautiful. And our maple cream. Got to get a nice dollop of that on top, right? See if I can make it pretty like they do in the commercials. Not too bad, right? And then we're going to top it with some of our candied nuts. Just like that. Sort of rustic too for our dessert. Oop, one overboard means I got to eat it. And let's taste. It looks so, so good. Get some of everything, some apple, the cream, of course the waffle, the nuts. See if I can get it all in one bite. Let's try. That is an indulgence you should not deny yourself. I'm telling you, dessert, breakfast, any time of day. This is so, so good. If you like the recipes from today's show, they're available on my website, that's savortheflavors.tv. Next time you're in St. Augustine, I'd love for you to visit my friends at Gaufre & Goods. But between now and then, I'd love for you to try my recipes. Either way, I hope you take time to savor the flavors.